What we're discussing today could quite frankly change your entire yoga practice. When I discovered for myself where I need to place my hips in my warrior poses, it opened up all of the poses to be freer and more organic in my body. Back in the day, I had a teacher, and maybe you have, and maybe you still do, have a teacher that says, Warrior 1, hips point forward. Warrior 2, open your hips out this way. Well, let me just break down the anatomy for you. So when we're standing, if you've seen an anatomical skeleton, you see those big, I call them Mickey Mouse ears of the pelvis. Those are your ilium bones. So they're like these big cups. And we don't want to get too technical in the terms, but then there's a socket, there's a cup in those joints, or in those bones that are your acetabulum, where your femur head goes into that. So that's basically the big bones of the hip, right? So when you're asking your hip, let's say in Warrior 2, to turn that front foot forward, that hip turns forward, right? Well, that other hip, the back hip, has to go with it because these bones move together. You can't ask your front hip to open that direction and then tell your other hip to go back that way. It's a bone. Bones don't do that. And then the joints in that bone, which is your SI joint, which is the joint that is your sacrum, with those ilium, those sacroiliac joint. So then that's the joint that is just now really super compromised. The ligaments and the tendons are hugging onto those joints. That's their job, to keep the bones and the joints safe. They're fighting. So you're asking your right hip, let's say in this case, to turn in the forward direction because your knee and your toe is pointing in that direction for Warrior 2. If you're asking your back hip to roll back this way, then that SI joint is getting pulled and the ligaments and the tendons around it are going to be stretched. Don't want to do that at all. They're not meant to. So you let your back hip really turn forward. I mean, don't be shy. Really let it turn forward so that you can get right on top of that front leg, and then you can equalize the balance of the pose by putting some weight into that back leg. So if my back hip is pointing this direction, let's say there's a headlight on it, that means my knee needs to point in that direction, as does my toe. So what I often see in yoga students of mine is that back toe starts to turn out a little bit. So as that toe turns out, now my ankle joint's pointing there, my knee joint is somewhere in the middle, and my hip is there. So basically my hip going here, my toe going there, my knee in the middle is like, it doesn't know where to go. So get all of those joints to align in the direction of the hip. It's kind of the boss in this pose. You find your outer foot really pressing into the mat. And then the element of a twist to this pose is bringing your shoulders. Now your shoulders are flush with the long edge of your mat. So there is a squaring off of those set of joints, but the hips are really turning this way. And you can find yourself really, really lunging into that leg, and it feels freer and it feels easier, believe it or not, even though it looks like it's deeper because your knee is bending deeper. Because why? It's architecturally sound. Got a vertical shin, got a horizontal thigh. That means all the muscles in the joints around that alignment isn't struggling. Have you ever had a yoga teacher that says, relax in the pose, and you're in like this super deep extended side angle pose? Well, you actually can relax in the pose when you find the architecture of your own body aligning up, because then you're not gripping those muscles to hold your body in place. You can soften into those hip joints and then take big sweeping gestures or whatever it is that you're doing from that position where you're not fighting your own anatomy and really gripping in. So try that with your next Warrior 2 and let me know how it goes.